everyone, Meltyman234 here, and welcome to another episode of Forgotten Media, where I dig up some stuff you may or may not have heard of. Today we'll be looking at a handful of Mario and Donkey Kong games, as well as a Yoshi game that were cancelled and never finished. Let's start off with the Mario Artist games for the Nintendo 64 disk drive. During the N64 DD's short life, they were originally going to make 8 games in the Mario Artist series before it was chopped in half. The games that weren't finished are Mario Artist Game Maker, Graphical Message Maker, Sound Maker, and Video Jockey Maker. Even though there isn't much info about these games, my guess is that Game Maker was going to be a game where you create your own levels, Graphical Message Maker would be something like a way to make fancy messages, Sound Maker would be a game where you just mess around with different sound clips, and Video Jockey is... I have no idea. Perhaps it was some way to make videos and share them with other disk drives or something like that. Next up, we have Mario Paint 64, another Nintendo 64 disk drive game. It was intended to be a sequel to Mario Paint for the Super NES, with some upgrades here and there, but since the disk drive was a big failure, it never saw the light of day. Next up, we have Super Mario 128. This one's pretty interesting. The only information that we know is that it's some game that has Mario and an army of mini Marios running around on a giant Monopoly board with blocks and other crap lying around. Well, the reason this game was never heard of again was that it was just a tech demo to show what the GameCube could handle. Several elements from the game would be incorporated into Zelda, Twilight Princess, and Mario Galaxy. After a while, Shigeru Miyamoto later revealed that Mario 128 was a very early blueprint for what would later become Pikmin. I always wondered if Mario 128 gave Nintendo some ideas for the Mario vs. Donkey Kong series. Next up is Super Mario 64 2, which was planned for the disk drive around 1999. That's right, Nintendo had plans to make a sequel to the classic Mario 64. Not much was given except that it was going to be for the N64 disk drive, and Luigi was planned to be featured since the game was going to be a multiplayer. Since the game was cancelled very early in development, some say that several elements of the game were moved on to Mario 64 DS, Mario Sunshine, and Mario Galaxy. Next are 2 Mario games called Super Mario FX and Super Mario RPG 2. These names would eventually become Mario 64 and Paper Mario. Next up is Super Mario's Wacky Worlds. This was a game planned for the Philips CDI. It featured Mario going around through different time eras, stopping on Koopas and so on. The game was considered to be a sequel to Super Mario World, but since the CDI had very poor sales, the game was cancelled, and Yoshi's Island became the official sequel to Mario World. I do find it odd that it was going to be a sequel to Super Mario World because, if you just look at it, it looks more like a sequel to Mario's Time Machine. Next up, we have Mario Land for the Virtual Boy. The only thing we know about the story of the game is that Mario battles Wario, and that's pretty much it. Mario Land would have Mario jumping in and out of the background, trying to give it a 3D visual effect. It was also said that a 3D version of Mario Brothers was going to be featured. Even though the game was canned, the 3D Mario Brothers became Mario Class, also for the Virtual Boy. Now let's move on to some Donkey Kong games. First up is Return of Donkey Kong for the NES. It was announced in the official Nintendo's Player Guide in 1987 and was never mentioned again. Some say this was going to be a sequel to Donkey Kong, others say it was a prototype of Donkey Kong Classics, and others believe it was going to be a remake of the original game for the Famicom Disk System. This game still remains shrouded in mystery. Another cancelled game similar to that is Donkey Kong World. There's barely any information on the game. I only guess that it was either going to be similar to Mario World, or it was an early name for Donkey Kong 64, just like Ultra Donkey Kong. Next up is Donkey Kong no Angaku Asubi. In English, it's translated to Donkey Kong's Fun with Music for the NES back in 1983. There was going to be 2 games featured in this. The first one is a music quiz. This is a 2-player option game where DK plays a tune and Mario and Pauline have to hit the right notes in the correct order. The other game is Donkey Band, where it's more of a music room creating different tunes here and there. It features DK on the guitar, DK Jr. playing the drums, Mario playing the piano, and Pauline is the main singer. A few years later, Nintendo released a game called Donkey Konga along with a few sequels. Some people believe that DK's Fun with Music could be connected to the Donkey Konga series. Next up is Donkey Kong Coconut Crackers, a puzzle game for the Game Boy Advance made by Nintendo and Rare. Obviously, the reason this game was scrapped was that Microsoft bought Rare and pretty much ditched the project. However, Donkey Kong Coconut Crackers would be reworked into It's Mr. Pants for the Game Boy Advance. Next is Diddy Kong Diddy Kong Pilot. Sorry about that, Diddy was in the way on the title. Anyway, this game was also made for the Game Boy Advance and was intended to be a sequel to Diddy Kong Racing. It features Diddy and the gang in airplanes racing around through various tracks. It would also feature a new character named Redneck Kong, a hillbilly ape whose relationship to the Kong family is still unknown. However, since Microsoft bought Rare, the game was scrapped and also reworked into Banjo Pilot. And speaking of racing, the next canceled game is also a racing game entitled Donkey Kong Racing for the GameCube. This was also going to be a sequel to Diddy Kong Racing. This was going to feature Donkey Kong, Diddy Kong, Tiny Kong, Kitty Kong, Raj, and other characters in this racing game. It would feature some of the animal buddies as the ride, such as Ingard, Ellie, Zinger, and a couple of others. Even though it wasn't announced that it was cancelled, there was very little information on the game, so it was declared unofficially cancelled. Nowadays, the GameCube has finished making their line of games, so I'm sure Donkey Kong Racing will never see the light of day. And finally, we have the cancelled Yoshi game, where it was going to be a remake of Yoshi's Story for the Game Boy Advance. This game would feature new islands, new enemies such as these creepy looking bullet bills and other stuff, but it never came to be because it was just a tech demo, which means it was made to show what the Game Boy Advance could handle during its time. So after all that hard work on these games, it's a shame that they were never completed. Well, that wraps up this episode of Forgotten Media, so this is Melting Man 234 signing out.